Hi, I'm Ted Haptegaber, founder and producer of Live Talks Los Angeles. Thanks for joining us. Since we started over a decade ago, we have brought you hundreds of conversations with storytellers, writers, actors, musicians, humorists, chefs, and thought leaders in business and science. You can watch and hear most of these in our YouTube channel and our podcast. For details, visit livetalksla.org. And now, here's the show you've tuned in to see.
Like many of us, I first met you as the actor who plays Dwight on The Office.
Yeah.
And it was early in my life as a civil rights lawyer, so this is me. This was you on TV, and this was me. I would come home from the Supermax prison or the police department or the vigil where something horrific had just happened, and I would just collapse on that couch next to my now husband, who would put a blanket over me, feed me some soup, and then what would we do? We would watch The Office. We would watch you. And you know, assistant to the regional manager, part-time beat farmer.
Assistant regional
I'm
manager.
sorry. I'm sorry it had to be said. You made us laugh. You made us laugh. And it wasn't just an escape. You know, it was a release. It was a return to joy. All these years later, I get to meet the artist who brought so many of us so much joy. And it turns out he's a deeply spiritual human being, someone who lives his Baha'i faith with conviction, especially its teachings around love, someone who has dedicated his whole life to the study of wisdom traditions, and who has done so with an open heart, with deep humility, a brilliant mind, but really a heart that leads with wonder. And you took all
Is someone
of what
recording this?
I'll write it down for you after. You took all of what you learned and consolidated it in what you call your life's work. And what he's given us, everyone, is a spiritual blueprint for how we might evolve the human race. And the thing about this book is that you hold up a spiritual vision that is brilliant, that is wise, but you do it with humility, with humor. I mean, who can talk about Star Trek and Kung Fu in the same breath as Jesus and Baha'u'llah? Like, not many people can do that. You gave us this gift, Rainn, and honestly, it was so electrifying for me to read this book, because when I put it down, I said, oh, if Rainn Wilson is holding up a vision for a spiritual revolution, then we might just have a chance. So my first real question to you is, how is it that the actor who gave us Dwight also became the person to give us spiritual revolution?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for the kind words. And I think that is kind of the most important question, and probably a question that's buzzing around in 80% of the brains out here. Why the hell is Dwight writing about spirituality?
I didn't say it like that.
And there's a number of reasons. I won't go into all of them in too much depth because we don't have a whole lot of time. I could talk for 45 minutes on the why. But I will say that, number one, growing up a member of the Baha'i faith, one of the things the Baha'i faith espouses is a excavation into deep spiritual questions of why we're here, why we're alive, what's our purpose, how do we devote ourselves to prayer, how do we find transcendence. And it accepts all of the beliefs of the world, all of the rich spiritual traditions, and honors them, and the great spiritual teachers that have come through the ages, and also seeks to build a better world using spiritual tools, which is a lot of what this book is about. So I grew up in this rich milieu with my parents inviting Buddhists into their living rooms, and when born-again Christians would knock on the door, they would invite them in and cook them pancakes and talk about the Bible. And
like all of us do.
and there were books on our shelves of, Egyptian mysticism and Sufi texts, and I grew up, with people gathering and praying and singing, and this was the kind of petri dish that grew this kind of ungainly, awkward, weird Rainn Wilson. And then fast forward to my 20s when I really jettisoned anything and everything having to do with religion, with spirituality, with faith, certainly with morality. I didn't want anything to do with that in my 20s, in living in New York City, pursuing my craft, the theater. I came to some very dark nights of the soul. And I say here, why did I write this book? Because I almost died. And my mental health journey, we didn't call it mental health in the 90s. We didn't call it anything. Everyone just kind of suffered silently and, tried to just suck it up and soldier on.
I don't remember. I wasn't born yet, so.
Oh, ouch. That hurts. That stings. Anyhow, I'm just letting you know about the ancient time called the 90s. The 90s. Balanced budgets. It was an amazing time. So I deeply struggled with anxiety, with depression, with addiction, and I really thought to myself, probably because of my Baha'i upbringing, I wonder if jettisoning everything having to do with spiritual and thought and religious belief has created this situation where I am so miserable. And I wonder if spirituality might hold the tools toward my salvation. And I don't mean salvation in a biblical sense of rising to the heavens. I mean in terms of, soothing my anxiety in a healthy way, and allowing me to find a vision and a mission and purpose and deep, soul-rich, bone-deep meaning in my life. So I did a lot of exploration, and I read a lot of the holy texts of the world. I did a lot of study. I went to a lot of different religious gatherings, a lot of praying, and I go into that in this book, also into the Bassoon King. I go even further into that personal journey. But coming out of that, I reconnected with my faith, and I truly believe that spiritual tools and rich wisdom, faith traditions hold the key not only to personal transformation, but to societal transformation as well. And part 3, I will say, is urgency. This is not some, there's a bored actor eating Cheerios, sitting in his underwear, writing something kind of for fun. I truly believe the world is at a precipice right now. Lives are at stake. The mental health epidemic in young people is killing young people. Suicidal ideation is at an all-time high. We know that college students are now considered the loneliest generation on planet Earth. I don't know if you're able to read the Surgeon General's report on loneliness as a health hazard in the United States right now. The list goes on and on. Needless to say, there's also war and a fractured, divisive, dangerous, gun-ridden political divide in our country, and we need answers and we need help right now, and the stakes have never been higher.
You talk about having to free yourself of a kind of notion of God that has kept so many of us from even touching spirituality. You call it like a Santa Claus God, the man with the long beard who is deciding who is naughty or nice, goes to heaven or hell. And even though you grew up in the Baha'i faith, and I grew up in the Sikh faith, we have such a similar view of an expansive, ever-creative, ever-evolving divine. And yet the Santa Claus God sits in our heads and keeps us away from what wisdom traditions might have to offer. So
I also call him Sky Daddy. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So how did you free yourself from Sky Daddy? Like what is your understanding of God now? Because I would love for them to hear how we might free ourselves from that Sky Daddy too.
I love it. It's my absolute favorite question, and it's a profound question, and I think that perhaps the most important question anyone can ask is there a God or not? Because either we live in a random universe filled with molecules and atoms and energy that has no meaning, it's just either founded 13 billion years ago or has always existed, and that's it. And we just happen to evolve consciousness like we're chimpanzees with bigger brains. So that's either that version of the universe, or there is some power and meaning and reason behind all of this stuff. It's not just a bunch of stuff. There is a shape to this stuff and a reason why we're here. My favorite question is really, why is there something instead of nothing? Why is there not just nothing? Why is there something? And this led me to kind of re-explore the idea of God. I have a chapter in the book called The Notorious G.O.D. Because we have fun, people. We have fun. Which was based on, by the way, a TV show that I pitched around town. Since this is L.A., we took a pitch out about God, my friends at SoulPancake and I, out to all the streamers and the cable outlets, and it was called The Notorious G.O.D. I wanted to do an exploration of God in the modern world. What would God look like through the lens of AI, or through atheists, or what's that? Through the idea, like the Matrix, the world of the Matrix, through visiting indigenous peoples and getting their ideas. And we got rejected everywhere, of course. But my favorite feedback was from a number of different streamers that said, it's too controversial. So you can have half-naked, drunken housewives from various cities around the country throwing garbage at each other. Totally fine. But a conversation about what God is in the modern world, too controversial. Can't go there. So, and I thought controversy was good for television. But anyways, so going back to my 20s, I had a really major realization. When I was studying these faith traditions, I was reading about Native American spirituality, and I came across the concept of the divine from the Lakota Sioux, which goes by the name of Wakantanka, which means the great mystery. So immediately I was like, oh, God to the Lakota is called the great mystery? Ooh, that's intriguing to me to get away from Sky Daddy, right? So the deeper I dug into this concept, I realized how incredibly transformative and brilliant this idea is, that this God, Wakantanka, the great mystery, exists beyond time and space, is only really knowable through nature, is only really accessible through the metaphors of nature, through the turning of the seasons, through the beautiful, powerful light and force of the sunlight, through blossoms blooming on trees, through the wind blowing through the grasslands. This is how we understand the great mystery, is through, for lack of a better gender term, his miracles. And it's a God of our ancestors. It's a God of the 7 directions, which is north, south, east, west, up, down, and in is the 7th direction. And it is completely unanthropomorphized. There's no man, there's no patriarchal element, there's no kind of dude with superpowers like a Marvel character looking down and giving this person a parking space and this person this person a cavity, and this person cancer, and like Odin. And and this was really transformative for me. And I really spent many years going, I don't know that I believe in God, but I believe in Wakantanka. I would even pray directly to Wakantanka. I would use that phrase. It was like it was like a transition for me. And I'm really excited. This is my favorite chapter in the book is that chapter of the exploration of the divine, because I could go on and on about it. Consciousness, I have a section on consciousness, and I think that consciousness is one of the most beautiful signs of the divine force that we get to experience in our own emotional three-dimensional movie of having our life experience. Gives us a hint of that divine power as well.
Rainn, I showed you my book backstage. I was like, it's all marked up. I don't think there are more stars than around that description of the divine, the creative force that binds and generates life, that exists beyond time and space, the God of our ancestors experienced in connection to the wind, the sunlight, the grasslands, and the water. My heart was singing because this is the concept of God at the heart of the Sikh faith, the Ik Onkar, which means oneness whose expression is ever unfolding, that I am part of the one and you are part of the one. That tree, this audience, this baby in the front row.
Not the baby.
It's my daughter, right? you can't say that.
Okay, the baby.
Thank you. The idea is that you can look upon the face of anyone and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. You are a part of me I do not yet know. This way to God cannot be, you can't get there through thinking. You write about it, that you can't think your way to this kind of God. You have to, it's not an idea to hold in your mind alone. You have to be able to experience it, to open yourself to experience it. And this is the other one that had almost as many stars. We humans are capable through language and image and art of indicating something beautiful and mysterious. It is the pointing that guides us to the mystery. Language and metaphor are the finger. Poetry and music are the finger. Holy writings, divine texts, and religious wisdom are the finger. A spiritual teacher is the finger. Pointing to where? To the ancient, luminous moon of the essence of truth, God, beauty, Ik Onkar, wisdom. But be careful not to mistake the finger for the moon. It struck me that even this conversation is the finger pointing to the moon. And my question for you, Rainn, is when have you had the moon?
Wow, that's a profound question. We used to moon a lot in junior high school. Sorry, Valarie, you're so...
daughter.
You're so... She doesn't understand what I'm talking about. I'll explain later. That's a beautiful question. I think that humans are wired to seek transcendence. We're wired in a lot of different ways, and the modern mythology of humanity is that we're aggressive, combative, competitive, dog-eat-dog, backstabbing, survival of the fittest animals. And that's in all the media, and that's in all of the conversations on cable news. And we start to believe that, we start to believe that mythology. I talk in the end of the book about creating a new mythology for humanity. And part of that mythology is the search for transcendence. So when have I experienced, the presence of the luminous moon? I've done it through art. I've had experiences like that. I had an experience, and I don't know, this is coming to mind, I've never really shared this, but when I first started acting, I did a play, I did Pygmalion in high school, and I played Alfred Doolittle. That was the play that was My Fair Lady was based on. And it was like my third play, and I was this Cockney, like, oh, I say, governor, we've got to change society, And I was playing the character, and then I said something, and they all turned in a certain direction, and there was a bowl of candies sitting, and this was in front of a full audience, and I had never done this in any rehearsal or anything like that before, and I just picked up the bowl of candies and dumped it in my pocket and put the bowl back, and I got a huge laugh from the crowd, and I had never rehearsed it, and that, to me, is a God transcendence. That was truly being in my art and in my craft, and that was really the moment I knew I wanted to be an actor, because there was something so mysterious of and unrehearsed and spontaneous about that's exactly what the character would have done in that moment, and I had released myself from the bonds of, adolescent, pimply, gangly Rainn Wilson playing a character into art. And I do believe that, for me, art is a way to know God. And in the Baha'i faith, Abdul-Baha, the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith, said in a letter to a young artist, he said, I rejoice to hear that thou hast taken pains with thine art, for in this glorious new age, art is the same as prayer. That is to say that when you put pen to paper, it is as twere thou wert kneeling in the temple. So the idea that there's an empty space on the stage and then song is produced or dance is produced or drama, there's an empty page and then there's poetry and then there's a beautiful watercolor or whatever, like that transcendence to me is the spirit of the creator. We know God as the creator. The fashioner is one of the names of God. I've also had certainly experiences in prayer and meditation. There's been times when I've felt a super deep communion, where I've felt a kind of I wouldn't even call it a voice, but like a pressure. And I also have a chapter in the book about sacred spaces and finding sacredness and pilgrimages. And I took a Baha'i pilgrimage, and on that Baha'i pilgrimage I had, when you're living for days, day in, day out, in sacred spaces, holy spaces, and communing with that sacredness, I found that really transformative as well.
I mean, that was one of the moments of the book that got a lot of stars. Because you describe this pilgrimage to Baha'u'llah's tomb, and you even describe how the air changed its scent. It held the scent of the oranges and the jasmine in the garden, and that time began to elongate, become like molasses. And you write, that may be the heart of holiness itself, the melting away of the illusion of separateness. And then you ask this question, this is supposed to be the most sacred place on earth, right? And here you ask this question, what if sacredness, rather than being relegated to a place or a thing, was a condition of holding divine light, an internal condition of communion? There is so much that pulls us away from communion in this culture, Rainn. The stress, the fatigue, the fear, the despair. We're just reeling from another mass shooting in Texas. I mean, there's so much that sucks your breath away, that makes you feel alone and agitated and hopeless. I ask you, how do you return to that communion, that awareness, the embodiment of the sacred?
Thank you for asking. I struggle with it. I'm in recovery, and in the 12 steps I find communion in a really beautiful way that is profoundly spiritual. I have a little meditation bench out in my garden that I meditate most mornings, and I find incredible peace there under this olive tree, and there's birds, and my anxious monkey mind melts away, and I'm able to just be unseparate from nature around me. But I think too, my mission is to incorporate more and more sacredness in interactions with people, in connections, and try and walk with sacredness. The Diné prayer, the Navajo people is walk in beauty. It's all this prayer about walking in beauty, and that idea brings a sacredness to the actions that we undertake. But it's something that I struggle with, because living in Los Angeles, especially, like so much of the world around us, is just so ugly. It's dumpsters and it's jack-in-the-boxes.
The ocean's right there.
And the ocean's right there. And the ocean is certainly sacred, and next to the sun, maybe the best and biggest metaphor we've got.
But you have to get to it.
To get to it down Pico with a lot of chain link fences and some Pizza Huts. But I struggle with that because we need to eat. We need to throw our garbage away. How do we bring the sacred into our contemporary lives? And that chapter is really posed more of questions than answers, because I don't have specific answers around that one. It's something I struggle with, but I do think it's something that culturally and personally, because again, in the book, in large parts of it, I'm bringing up two spiritual paths, right? The personal transformative spiritual path that has to do with, we do meditation, we do yoga, we ponder, we reflect, we try and become more wise, more gentle, more kind. That's our personal spiritual path, which I compare to the television show Kung Fu.
That's right.
And then
my next question.
The other spiritual path that people in America, frankly, are not terribly interested in, and we need to think about more, is spiritual tools to transform society, to help build at grassroots, to bring people together, to make the world a better place, that we seek the personal spiritual grace and wisdom and serenity so that we can take that in the world and try and help others in the world and not just hold it to ourselves. Because then it's selfish and narcissistic, like us Americans are. We're just keeping this thing because, this benefits me, I'm just going to hold on to it. We're not sharing it, and as the Buddha tasks us with, reducing the suffering of others, we gain compassion so that we see the suffering of others so that we want to take away the suffering of others. What was the question?
You actually are answering my next one,
okay.
So I feel like we're doing great. This is the other thing that thrilled me, is that in the Sikh faith, we have this concept of the sage warrior. The sage warrior, the sage, the Sant Sipahi, the sage is enamored by the world as it is. The mystery, the magic of being here alive with you, to be enamored by that, to look at the world through the eyes of love, to love is to sage, right? And then that's not enough, that inner tranquility, that inner personal transformation, that awakening, because the warrior is fighting for the world as it ought to be, laboring for the world as it ought to be. What juxtaposition, the breathe and the push, the sage and the warrior, the personal and the political, the love and the revolution. You can see this is where I'm at, that we need both. We need revolutionary love. And so I'm using all this language, the sage warrior, revolutionary love. And here Rainn comes along and uses Kung Fu and Star Trek. And then I get a little mad, but then I thought, this is how it's accessible to so many more people. You're breaking it down. And so I want you to spend a little bit more time talking about how this young monk in Kung Fu and this Captain Kirk, my captain was really Captain Picard, but take your pick, how both of them
That's
together.
That's so 90s.
Reruns. Rainn, I watch reruns. How both of them point a way forward.
Yeah, so I grew up, I was kind of raised by a television set, like many of us were, and in the 70s, my two favorite TV shows were Kung Fu and Star Trek, and as I was thinking about this point that I wanted to make, that in the Baha'i philosophy, we have a twofold moral purpose, it's called. And that's personal transformation and the transformation of society. So the spiritual path is twofold. In contemporary Los Angeles, the spiritual path is usually onefold, like how do I transform, gain serenity, peace, and wisdom personally? And then that isn't often, not all the time, but it isn't often in the same discussion about how do we transform others. So Kung Fu is about Kwai Chang Caine, for those of you who don't know, who left his Shaolin monastery where he had been studying martial arts, where he had been learning Eastern wisdom, profound wisdom of Confucianism and Taoism, etc. And he goes to the Old West in the 1880s looking for his brother, where he encounters all these racist cowboys and angry people and people with guns, and there's always an ass-kicking fight that he has every, twice an episode. And I view that as our personal journey, that we're like Kwai Chang Caine. We're bringing our wisdom and our tradition. We're walking the world. We're dealing with our version of racist cowboys, whatever it is. It could be mean bosses or annoying, family members or whatever it is. And we're trying to instill peace and bring people together and learn and grow. And that's our personal, internal spiritual path. The other spiritual path is Star Trek, which to me is the most spiritual show in all of television. Now, and Gene Roddenberry is spinning in his grave right now, because for him it was all about science and technology, right? And the wonders of science, and that is true. But let's back up a little bit. In the mythology of Star Trek, I talk about Star Wars as well, but in Star Trek, there's been a World War III, and out of the ashes of that conflagration, humanity has found peace with itself. It has united. There is a federation of an advanced version of the United Nations. We have solved racism. Diversity is celebrated in Star Trek. People of different skin colors and ethnicities and cultures and classes are celebrated. Sexism has been eliminated. Income inequality has been eliminated through technology, which maybe if we stopped making so many missiles and guns and tanks and bombs and drones and whatnot, and focused all of that time, energy, and attention onto, income inequality and, food distribution and agriculture, et cetera, we could solve that as well. But so humanity is at that place where, because it has matured, because it has gained wisdom, it is then able to boldly go and seek out new life and new civilizations because of this paradise that it has built on planet Earth. And that's a vision that we can hold toward. Can you reveal about your next project, the 250, or not yet?
Well, now I
can't
can.
talk about it. Sorry, I put you on the spot. But
Yeah,
it has to do.
sure.
It has to do with what you're working on a little bit,
Absolutely.
which is a vision for humanity's future, because contemporary America. I remember in the 70s we would talk about world peace, and people wouldn't laugh and roll their eyes and be snide about it. People really thought world peace was possible.
Yeah.
Beauty contestants would, politicians would, celebrities would, like musicians would. We were talking about, let's give peace a chance, and this idea that we can all live in harmony. I talk about the blue marble photograph, the first photograph of planet Earth taken from one of the spaceships and brought back down, and that hung in every classroom around the world. And this, people really thought once the blue marble, like, oh, now we're going to have world peace because we have a picture of Earth. Look at how beautiful it is and how fragile it is, sustained in the darkness of space. And we only have each other, and there's no borders. There's no borders down there. We're just we're a species inhabiting a planet among other species, and we can be the caretaker of this beautiful blue marble. So we have to, part of what the book is, in the second half of the book, is establishing a vision for where can we go as a species on this planet. We don't have to be stuck in competition, in contest, in one-upsmanship, and live free or die, don't tread on me, kind of survival of the fittest, social Darwinism, kind of like, we don't have to be stuck in that if we don't want to. Unfortunately, it may take a giant collective tragedy for us to kind of move to the next level, but we can do it, and we have to believe and we have to keep hope alive that that kind of transformation is possible, and that there can be spiritual tools to help us along that path.
I mean, one of the gifts of this book is that you tell a story of the future that could be. And we can only live into what we can imagine first. And so how many of us have just watched the apocalypse? How many times have we watched the apocalypse and every kind of show and every kind of media content? We can only live into what we imagine. And so for you to lift up a story of a world that makes it, that emerges from a fractured warlike past into a united peaceful future, and then here are the tools for how, is such a profound gift. And the reason that I'm And I will reveal. I've decided I will reveal the big idea.
Just give it a tease.
Okay.
A little tease.
Well, I need to build up to it.
Okay.
This is me building up to it.
Good.
So I've spent 20 years fighting for racial justice in this country, and then I had my children, and I had a total crisis. I thought, all the films, the lawsuits, the campaigns, what were they all for, if not to make the nation safer for them? They were born around the 2016 election season. So I had a real crisis, and I stepped back and asked myself, what is driving all of the crises, all of the fires that we're trying to put out, the social, political, and economic crises of our time are fueled by a deeper spiritual crisis, a constriction of the human heart, the choice to stand for some of us rather than all of us, in policy, in word, and in deed. And so we need sound government. We need just policies. And the only way we will get to that bright, united future that you hold up, Rainn, is through a shift in culture and consciousness, a way of being, a way of seeing that leaves no one outside of our circle of care. What we need is a revolution of the heart, what I call revolutionary love, what you call spiritual revolution. And I keep thinking that what we are asking for is evolution. Imagine if we are the ones to teach humanity how to live sustainably with the earth for the first time as a global community. Imagine if we are the ones to birth America into a nation that has never been a truly multiracial democracy. What does that take? It needs to be transformed from the inside out, from how we are together, how we build community together. And so my idea, and then I have another question for you. My idea is that in a few years we'll be celebrating the 250th birthday of the United States, and it's really the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And we needed a Declaration of Independence to launch a war and to establish a new nation. And people for whom that declaration was never meant, seized on the words life, liberty, pursuit of happiness to make them more and more true. So we need that declaration. We've taken it very far in our country. And if independence is our only core value, we're not going to get much farther. If the Declaration of Independence shaped the last 250 years, what we need is a declaration of interdependence to shape the next 250 years. So I'm talking 250 years. That means we evolve to last. And my final question to you, well, I may have one more after, is what truly gives you hope that we can evolve, that we will evolve?
Do you have another question? So I spoke before, at the end of the last chapter, I have 7 pillars of a spiritual revolution. I actually finished the book the chapter before, and it was really depressing, and I had finished the book, and I was like, I need to have positive, proactive takeaways, something for people to hang their hats on and work toward to kind of lift the end of the book. So I feverishly, past deadline, wrote the last chapter, and I'm really glad that I did. We talked about this mythology, right? We have that old mythology of humanity. Here's one of my favorite quotes. John D. Rockefeller was asked by a reporter, who was the richest man on earth at the time, how much money is enough? And he responded, just a little more. So this is an old mythology of humanity. Like I said, it's competitive, it's combative, it's adversarial, and our systems are built along adversarial lines. Every single system in the world right now is devolving, it's decomposing, it's unraveling, and it's unsustainable because it's built on the worst qualities of humanity.
Yes.
So
yes.
You could take any, I was talking to a friend about healthcare the other day. So these, what are they called? Hedge funds are coming in and buying, a hospital here and a doctor's clinic here and a bunch of medicine clinics here, and they're just redlining them and looking through and saying, what do we cut? And this isn't profitable, shut it down. And our healthcare system is being run by bean counters who are like John D. Rockefeller. And a healthcare system, call me old-fashioned, I believe, should be based on healing people and curing sickness. So this isn't enough to pass legislation or change policy about the role hedge funds can play in the buying of businesses, although that's not a bad idea. We can certainly start there, but this is what we always do in the American democracy, is we believe that we can legislate our way out of injustice. We believe we can legislate away racism, and we can legislate away income inequality. Of course policy is important. The civil rights movement, we needed those laws changed out to get us out of Jim Crow, but the work doesn't stop there. So I believe that that one of the tools that I bring up is to foster joy and squash cynicism. So, and it goes from there into reinventing adversarial systems. So if we can reinvent the whole conception of what a healthcare system is, it's easier said than done. But this is not, again, about legislation, it's about transformation. I was working with this amazing acting teacher named Andre Gregory, who was the subject of the film My Dinner with Andre. And I got to work with him in the 90s. And he would meet with each acting student, and we had tea, and we were having tea, and he said, "So, Rainn, how are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm really down. I'm really pessimistic, and I'm cynical, and I just feel like the world is going to shit, and I just don't know what difference it makes and why we're doing theater and blah, blah, blah." And he was very old then. Now he's still alive. He's so ancient. He's like 150. He grabbed my arm hard. I can still remember the feeling of his hand grabbing my forearm. And he said, Don't do it. Don't be cynical. Don't be pessimistic. If you're cynical, they win. If you're pessimistic, they win. You've got to keep hope alive. You've got to foster joy, you've got to inspire hope, and you've got to believe. If we all sit back and we're cynical and pessimistic and jaded, they are going to win, and nothing is going to change. So, in a weird way, I feel like what gives me hope, I have to have hope. Because otherwise nothing will change. I had to have enough hope to write this book and put myself out there as a Hollywood actor, where Hollywood actors do not talk about God, or else they're ostracized like some of the weirdo ones. I mean, I know I just crossed a line, but I'm a little weird, but I'm not like that weird. Well, that to name names. But I know so many beautiful people working in Hollywood that have faith traditions and meditate and really give back and are just beautiful souls. But it's risky to talk about God and faith and spirituality when you're a sitcom actor. It's certainly not doing this to help my career. I don't think, Judd Apatow's going to go oh, we got to get that God actor guy with the big head in one of my movies. I don't think it's going to work that way. But I feel like what gives me hope is I have to have hope. I have to believe that transformation is possible. I do believe that in this new mythology of humanity, what is that? That's the same thing you're talking about. We're interdependent.
Yes.
We are communal. We have cooperated over the eons as well as competed. We have shared information, technology, trade. We have loved each other. We have merged and formed cooperatives, and we have consulted and come to peaceful agreements. This is also the mythology of humanity. We also have that part of ourselves. So you're right, the revolution really is an evolution, and I profoundly believe that humanity can evolve. There may be some setbacks, difficulties, and overwhelm and trauma on the way to getting there, but we have to get there, and we're going to head there eventually.
This is the transformation that humanity This is the transformation that humanity is inevitably moving toward, a profound understanding that we are all linked, more than linked. In fact, we were never separated in the first place. We are interconnected like cells in a single body, alive only in relation to one another, bound together, as the poet Rumi describes, with the most powerful force in the universe. Love is the whole thing. We are only pieces. Rainn, my children are 4 and 8. They will watch The Office one day. And they will say, why is the spiritual visionary Rainn Wilson playing Dwight on The Office?
We have time for questions. And since there's so many new people here, I just need to remind you how questions work here. Questions typically begin with a W or an H, sometimes a D. They are generally short. Two-part questions is not something we believe in. Valarie is the only one who gets to ask follow-up questions.
So I feel like a lot of what you talked about with the things that come down to the root of everything that's happening also can be coming down to mental health, and a lot of people are in pain, or generations before us have not taught other people how to speak about feelings and maybe hug a little. So what do you see in the future, like a perfect way to like allow people to heal and kind of work on mental health, even for past generations, besides them all dying off and just letting us do a better job, but like the ones, we need them on the planet sometimes, what would you suggest, especially with like older family members and things like that? I don't know if that made sense.
I can give that a stab. The mental health crisis is something that I've experienced in crippling anxiety attacks and other issues that I've spoken about, and seeing the depth and extent and pain and ferocity and deadliness of the current mental health epidemic it's staggering, and something needs to be done. Stuff is being done. There are more and more resources, but it doesn't seem to be getting better. One of the issues, and why I also wanted to write this book, is that because contemporary American society, and especially in the big cities, where the mental health epidemic is worse than in the heartland, some would say that's because of having a religious foundation. But you can look at the data. It's pretty clear that it's worse in the cities. We have so wholeheartedly rejected anything and everything to do with religion that we've also, as I said in the book, thrown the spiritual baby out with the religious bathwater. So we've just jettisoned religion. Oh, religion sucks, and it does, by and large, suck. It's responsible for some of the worst crimes in all of humanity. It has, it can be judgmental and tyrannical, but contained in those deep religious traditions, our spiritual wisdom is spiritual wisdom that can be incredibly transformative. So one of the things that I don't have like the answers to the mental health epidemic, but I will say that there are spiritual ideas that can help the young people that we're not turning toward. Schools won't teach it or touch it with a 10-foot pole. Most therapists won't go there at all or talk about God or meaning or prayer or maybe some light meditation and mindfulness practice that doesn't offend anyone. But like, for instance, one of the things that I talk about is suffering. So in my section on God, I talk about suffering and the nature of suffering. One of the biggest questions of all time. Why do we suffer? Why does an innocent person get bone cancer? Why does a totally nice, loving person get hit by a bus? Like, why is there suffering in the world? In this physical realm, why is there so much pain? It's so challenging and difficult. But if you reframe the question, and of course the Buddha taught, his first teaching was, I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering. And of course the first of the Four Noble Truths being suffering is, or life is suffering. he used the term dukkha, which is from Pali, which means dissatisfaction, chronic dissatisfaction. Life is chronic dissatisfaction, which I relate to. I wake up in the morning like, ugh. Oh, they didn't text me back, and my foot hurts, and this coffee's cold, and ugh. Like, I'm very easily live in that state, right? But if we understand that we're on this physical plane and in order to grow our souls, and that suffering best grows our souls individually and collectively, then we have a different understanding of, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the 2-sentence version. As we learn about suffering and learn to accept that it exists and it is part of the human experience, in fact, it's foundational to the human experience, then you can develop the one thing that therapists say is most missing in the younger generations, resilience. So resilience is what allows you to have a setback and bounce back and say, it's okay, I'm going to just continue. I'm going to grieve that, I'm going to process that, and then I'm going to move on. But how can you develop resilience if you don't talk about suffering and you don't frame suffering around the development of the human soul and its spiritual journey? Thanks.
Hi, I'm an intuitive and a medium reader. I've been doing spiritual work for 20 years, and what I find is that we're still very, very fringe, very, very hidden. And, you know, growing up in LA and being in LA, you read people of all walks of life here. And my question to you is, what I have found is that it's very hard for doing this work and how it affects you personally, even when you're doing this professionally, putting yourself out there. But for you to do this, it was just a soul boom for me because people hide us. So you coming out and doing this, how did you wrestle with this spiritually to make yourself so public? Because I do this professionally, and it's hard. It's really hard. It affects all of your life, and you're way more public. So I'm just wondering what path you took and what you did innerly to come to peace with that.
I came out of the spiritual closet. I like you got to introduce that metaphor. That's funny. Thank you so much for asking. I don't know that it's anything that profound. I feel like I'm in a very privileged position because it would be much harder to do it if I was at the beginning of my acting career as opposed to like the twilight of my acting career. I don't think I'm at the twilight of it. I think there's a lot more roles in front of me, but at the same time, financially it doesn't bother me as much, so that's one consideration. Two is like, I've just done a shit ton of work in therapy and in recovery and in my own personal practice, and I just don't give a shit what people think about me anymore. So, I'm sorry, children. But I truly don't, and I believe that the ideas that I'm writing about and that Valarie works on and lectures on and teaches as well, these transformative ideas in the soup of the humanity's spiritual wisdom traditions. Like I said, the stakes are so high that I had to come forward with them because I believe that this can help people, and we have to, I would say, let our need for service override our personal ego needs more and more, and to train ourselves into kind of maximum service, because love is not a feeling in your heart. Love is an action that you undertake. So this is it's something we can all work on, and everyone can do. You don't have to be a wildly handsome television celebrity to do it. But no, really, but you can be a school teacher or a bus driver or work at Trader Joe's. It doesn't really matter. We can all, be of service to others. We can all build community. We can seek to build bridges. We can seek to become wiser and bring that wisdom into our communities. So, yeah.
First of all, I thank you for the inspiration from both of you and your passion for the beauty of the planet and people. I actually work with people in recovery and trauma, and you were mentioning it, Rainn, about the gift of the recovery program is that the spirituality is not religiosity. The spirituality is about my actions towards another person. And one of the great spiritual techniques is when in a dark place, reach out to someone else who you think might need some support. And you guys have done it today. And one of my concerns as a therapist, especially with young people, are the digital medias. Because when I look at your eyes, I have the capacity to have empathy. When I'm at this all day long, I'm losing it. And I see it with so many of the young kids I work with today. So if there's any parents here, you have any advice on how to get kids off of this as they're crossing the street. Thank you.
You want to talk about social media?
Oh, my kids know they're not getting phones till college. So I know older parents laugh at me, and so that might change in a few years. But you have an older child, and I remember hearing that you sent him to a digital detox camp and how good it was for him.
Yeah, we, I was fortunate to have enough money to send him to a sleepaway camp, where they take away their phones for a month and they're hiking and camping and kayaking, and he spent several summers in that way, and it was transformative to see a child come back from nature after a month without a phone, like they're vibrant and alive in an entirely new way. So, we try in our family, and we try and we fail to have digital detox, day off with phones away, evenings, where we put our phones away so that we can enjoy the sanctity of television without our phones.
Yeah.
It's I don't have any solutions around it. I think that I think 100 years from now we'll look back on humanity and be like, can you believe we did that? Can you believe we dropped into every man, woman, and child's pocket a little computer with unlimited porn on it, and unlimited distraction on it, and unlimited dopamine releases on it, and that no one will ever be bored again? How amazing it was, this is before the 90s, in the 70s, when we were bored all the time. Like, you would just be like, summer vacations was just like, and like, my dad was like, come on, we're going to the hardware store. Like, sit here, I'm gonna be an hour buying nails. And it's like, and there wasn't any, we weren't, candy crushing our way toward dopaminic ecstasy. But it's a big issue, and again, culturally, we have to look at this. I don't have any hard answers around it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. May I start with the sentence?
Where'd Ted go?
Hello, I'm over here. Hi, my name is Rachel. Hi, Rainn. I work at the school. I teach music here, which is a good time. But I'm also in my 20s, and I am very cynical and angry a lot of the time about the state of the world and all things around me. So I was wondering, would you be willing to yell at me for a moment into my voice memos recording to stop being cynical? For like a half second. I don't have a lot of money because I'm a teacher, but I could pay you like $5 after or something.
So you're recording right now?
I have a
Okay.
voice memo.
Okay,
I don't
Rainn.
know if that's allowed. But
Don't be cynical, idiot.
We have such different
no,
approaches.
I want to say, well, I would go back. I mean, I think this is going to be available online or something like that, and you can go back and listen to that section about Andre Gregory and whatnot. But I do think that one of the pillars of a spiritual revolution I talk about in here, and it's something I believe very strongly, is don't just protest, build something. So we have, in our contemporary culture, it's a culture of protest, right? Like, oh, there's a grave injustice that just happened. Like, like in New York City, another black man with mental health problems was strangled by someone and killed in front of other people, and it's wrong, and it's horrible, and There's so many things that are broken that led up to that situation, and racist policy and whatever, and that's all terrible. And then there's New Yorkers out with signs, and maybe he'll get put in jail, and maybe some police reform will happen and someone will get fired or something like that, and another homeless shelter will be built, and then we'll just go on, right? So don't just protest, build something. It's easy to protest. It's easy on Twitter to protest. It's easy to hold a sign and yell and march. What do we do with that anger and that outrage is, we can again look at the example of like Thich Nhat Hanh, who was injured and outraged at the Vietnam War, and look at how he transformed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives through his work on mindfulness, through the monasteries he's set up, the books he's written, and he walked that line perfectly of the Kung Fu and the Star Trek path of personal transformation so that we can transform society. But to harness that anger into building something, it's so easy to protest, it's so hard to go into a community and build a coalition and bring people together and have a potluck and meet and systematize the things you want to change and work on it, not necessarily through just, again, political policy and legislation, but through building at the grassroots. So I would say that energy is a great indicator. Hey, I have this outrage energy, and the contemporary culture wants us to be outraged, because if we outrage, we click on the news and I can't. And you watch the 11 o'clock news of coming up next, is your refrigerator a threat? And it's. It's fear and it's outrage. It's like, can you believe what Trump did? Can you believe what Trump did are the most clicked on articles, right? That's why we've been talking about it nonstop for 7 years. But we're not transforming that energy into something proactive.
Yeah. The question I hold in my heart every day now is, the future is dark. Is this the darkness of the tomb or the darkness of the womb?
She's good, right?
There are days so deadly.
Or the darkness of the Zoom.
Oh God, no! I don't know if I can be on stage with you again. I have my whole. It's true. There are days so deadly, I feel like I can taste the ash in my mouth. And so if you're feeling breathless these days, I'll tell you what my mentor told me. Your breathlessness is not a sign of your weakness. It's a sign that you are awake. You are awake to what's happening in the world right now. We're in transition, Yeah. Will we teeter on the brink of a civil war in the United States, or will we birth a multiracial democracy? Will we learn how to live sustainably with the planet, or are we on the brink of mass suffering and mass extinction? You're awake. And so my invitation to you is when you're seeing the darkness of the tomb, when you're standing in all of that trauma and despair and anxiety, if you have the audacity to lift your gaze and see what's happening on the edges. People who have no obvious reason to love one another coming together to grieve with each other, to feed each other, to organize with each other, to protest, and then to build something together. Every time that happens, I feel like I'm looking into the world that is waiting to be born. It's glimpses of the world that is waiting to be. It's the darkness of the womb. And that gives me enough energy to show up and do my part in the labor. What is your role in the labor? And every one of us has a role to play. Don't be the hero who comes to save the day. Be the lover who stays and stays. So you're at a school and you're at a company and you all have a role to play, a sphere of influence that only you can play. So what do you need to show up with your love, with your whole heart, knowing that you are not alone, and you are definitely not alone.
Yeah.
Hello, Rainn. So I know there's a lot of people who are very set in their ways religiously, politically, and everything. What do you think would be the best way to have a conversation, a very engaging conversation with someone like that?
With people that are set in their ways?
Yes, to
Yeah.
be able to have like a back and forth kind of
Yeah,
understanding conversation.
I talk about in the book to find a precious point of unity. I have this friend, Callum Greaves, who works in climate activism, and he writes speeches for Greta Thunberg, among other things, and works with these youth activists. And he told me, you know, whenever I work on climate issues, I work on clean air. Why? Because everyone wants clean air. It doesn't matter, you could be a hardcore right-wing Republican libertarian, you can be, you know, a lefty, it doesn't matter, across the political spectrum, across race, gender, culture, it doesn't matter, everyone wants clean air for their children. And he said, and guess what? When you get clean air, you're reducing CO2 and you're helping with climate change. So clean air is an example of like a precious point of unity where divergent people can all work for something that they believe in. So I think it's in our collaborations and communications, consultations with other people to find that precious spark. It's very difficult to do because we often have, well, here's my agenda, and I want no more AR-15s, and so we like ban AR-15s. Well, that's only going to get us so far. What can we do around gun control? Like what ways can we come together around gun control to transform the thinking around guns? Yeah. And I wanted to say too, going back to the music teacher, Rachel, like music is such an important and powerful tool for societal transformation. So we can learn notes and we can sing together, we can play together, we can compose, we can collaborate. That's all beautiful and it's transcendent too, but some of the greatest world movements have come through music. So
Yes.
to not forget that whatever area we're working at, we can harness the tools of that craft or that art or that business toward social progress and wisdom. Yeah.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Thank you so much, both Valarie and Rainn, for trying to spread this message that's really hard for people to grasp and really hard for us to even put words to, and therefore hard to make other people understand. And I think what you're both saying, in order to have a spiritual evolution and a spiritual revolution, we need to have a spiritual involution. The path, the journey is inward. And a lot of people have a really hard time finding that out. I'm also in recovery. Thank you for sharing that you are as well. And the 12 steps have helped me learn so many tools that are rooted in spirituality that I think a lot of people can benefit from. And I've tried to share from these books, such as yours, how the true path, the journey inward, is the way out, is the way to salvation. And I am looked at like I am crazy when I try to share this message. So how do we create awareness? How do we start this path to revolution?
Well, I have some read the book, jerk. No.
He bullet points.
No, that's very beautifully said. I jest. That is very beautifully said, and you're 100% right. Thich Nhat Hanh says the only way out is the way in. And it's true that the way out of trauma, the way out of suffering, the way out of mental health issues, the way out of the pain of society is in. But again, I believe, going back to this twofold moral path and the Kung Fu and the Star Trek, that we go in so that we can go out. If there's a yin and a yang energy, I believe, that you work on your core, and you charge your spiritual batteries so that you can go serve others. That's the Buddha's charge. That's Thich Nhat Hanh's charge. It doesn't end there. And in navel-gazy Goop magazine, Los Angeles, we kind of like, oh, I'm in self-care, and I'm doing self-care in my meditation, and I'm smelling my lavender oils, and then it stops, right? And then like I feel a little bit of relief, and this really rankles me. It's like I feel some relief, I feel some peace, I feel some serenity, and I stop. What's the difference between I'm hungry and I eat a cheeseburger and I stop? It's consumerist mentality. It's materialist mentality. It's narcissistic and self-serving. You gain serenity so that, and this is in the 12-step program, you gain serenity so you can go serve others, right? And in service is the highest manifestation of praise to the divine. That is how it works. So how do you start it? Well, you start with yourself, and you start with those close to you, and you meditate, you pray, you connect with nature, you do cold plunges, you do anything that can bring you that peace, so that then you can take that energy outward and help build community, don't just protest, build something, do something to help transform, even and start really small. It's the interesting thing about service is, when I was first getting involved in any kind of like service work or nonprofit work, like I was like, oh my God, this is when I was an unemployed actor. I was like, oh my God, I'm so busy. How am I going to have the time to do this? Ugh. How am I going to have the time to have therapy once a week? Oh my God, I'm so busy. Like, I was just sitting there in my underwear. And, but you add it, and then you find that you can't really live your life without it. Like, you do a little bit more and a little bit more, and it starts to spread. And especially if you do it with friends, it can be viral. This kind of change can be viral. But again, that yin and yang dance, that I charge my spiritual batteries so that I expend them out here. And in the doing, it actually charges my spiritual batteries more. And then I expend that energy as a kind of spiritual capital in community building and transformation out there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just one practice to put in your hands. Imagine walking down the street and seeing faces, and when you see a face, even under a mask, say to yourself, brother, sister, sibling, aunt, uncle, beloved. And when you are doing that, you are retraining your eye to see all others as kin. If family names don't work for you, you can say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. It sounds very simple, but who we see as one of us shapes whose stories we hear, who we decide to help, where we decide to live, who we volunteer for, what policies we support, and what leaders we elect. Demagogues succeed in dehumanizing entire populations of people when they successfully shut down our ability to wonder about each other. So you are a part of me I do not yet know. Imagine making that a way of orienting to the world, orienting to your life. I'm less interested in turning people into activists. I'm more interested in inviting you into a way of being, a way of seeing that leaves no one outside of your circle of care. And when you see the world through the eyes of wonder like that, be surprised by what happens next. That's, I think, how we walk the path that you lay before us.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
And our final question over on your left for the evening.
Hi, Rainn. I'm Taylor, also a music teacher here at New Rose.
Wow.
Thank you both so much. This was truly amazing, and I wholeheartedly believe in what you're saying in your mission. And you kind of answered my question in the last question, so off the cuff, I'm curious, if we're seeking a God of one's own understanding, which is how I'm receiving your message, and for some that's a higher power, God, Buddha, whatever you want to call it, that source energy that can provide so much healing. How would you suggest that one go about that? Or perhaps how did you have that moment of faith to give you hope and to continue on and carry the message?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So the main purpose of my writing this book was to create an itch of spiritual curiosity and to start a discussion around spiritual topics, which we in Western contemporary culture, we don't like to talk about. We don't talk about God. We don't talk about death. We don't talk about suffering. We don't talk about the soul. We don't talk about the sacred. We'll talk about politics, but we won't talk about these other topics, right? So, and yet these are the topics that have driven our human experience for hundreds of thousands of years on the planet. So I would say the first step is to foster a curiosity, and a deep curiosity. For me, I feel very fortunate because I reached such a dark night of the soul in my 20s, and have touched on it in other decades as well, that it drove me to search for God, for meaning, for purpose. And I came back to the religion of my childhood. Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, she said, "I come to spirituality not out of virtue, but out of necessity." So for me, I came to a spiritual path out of necessity because I was miserable. And I'm so grateful for that now. And that's, again, how suffering works. I look back on the suffering like, oh, I'm so grateful that I was that miserable, that it brought me somewhere where I feel like I'm a part of something. And I feel like I have a path. So in the search for a higher power, you start with a deep curiosity. One of my frustrations, again, about contemporary society is that so many people will say that they're agnostic. Well, I'm agnostic. I have a problem with God. I'm agnostic. Great. Completely understand that. Oh my God. I've been there. I spent years there. I completely empathize with that position. Now what? Are you going to be a victim, or are you going to do something about that? Because people stop there and they get stuck. I have a problem with God. And they just stay there. And you know what? They'll stay there for decades. I've talked to friends of mine that I went to college with 30 years ago, and they're saying the exact same thing they said 30 years ago as they're saying now. Yeah, I have a problem with God. I just don't know. I think I believe in something, but I just don't know. And they haven't read a book. They haven't downloaded a meditation app. They haven't listened to podcasts. They haven't traveled the world. They haven't walked the El Camino in Spain. They haven't, gone to a silent meditation retreat. They haven't read Eckhart Tolle. They haven't read Thich Nhat Hanh or some of the great contemporary spiritual teachers, let alone the Buddha and the Bhagavad Gita and so many other texts. So it's kind of like develop that curiosity so that it drives you towards study, reflection, action, and a yearning, because it's that yearning that's going to lead us somewhere, both, again, individually and collectively. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Valarie. Thank you, Rainn.